what is the reflection? Are we the people here sitting here in Delhi and I don't know, south of the equator getting very excited of the Quad, or are people in America also getting excited about it?
Namaste, Mr. Gulati. Thank you for having me on your show. Always a pleasure to be here. The diaspora is as excited over here as they are back home in India, and they should be. This is a historic meet. Great for Prime Minister Modi to finally meet with his counterpart, Vice President Harris. They had a very productive and a genuinely warm exchange, and of course, the VP was cordially invited to India, and hopefully she'll make that trip soon. But there's so many important issues that overlap, and they can no longer be ignored between these two great democracies. Not just defense and counterterrorism and climate change, but of course all the issues surrounding the vaccine. Whether it's the mutual recognition of certifications or removing of this trademark that has come up recently, where now you've got countries really claiming that now they own, the trademark to the vaccine, so to speak, and also the raw materials. The blockade needs to be stopped so that a country like India can become the supplier to the world. We really are the global pharmacy right now, and I think both countries understand India's role in this. And I think everybody's on board. The optics look great. It's all genuine. It's not a put on. I think they're genuinely excited to see. And everywhere in the media, I'm seeing all eyes are on PM Modi. India is one of the most important players in this global summit, and everybody seems to want to hear what the Prime Minister has to say. So that's fantastic for us. I think it's high time that we put our foot down and we step up our own role on the global stage. And also, I think it's time for the US also to really, work even more closely with us after this.
Okay, so what I'll take away from that is that, we are not being able to really talk about the Quad because maybe still we don't understand what the Quad is doing. It's still a bit vague. This is technically official meeting number 4. And we're not sure what it's doing. So I don't know. Let me try to get in Charles Thompson. Charles Thompson, are we alone in getting excited about the Quad? Is it now a real thing? If so, how is it a real thing that changes the dynamics on how the world is going to run?
I don't want to go off topic, but I think that meeting between Narendra Modi and Scott Morrison could turn out to be hugely significant. Not so much for the Quad, but for a free trade agreement. If you look in the early 2000s, China was the land of opportunity. And Australia, over the last 20 years, has got billions and trillions of dollars. Now China is the land of high risk in every level. And India doesn't easily sign free trade agreements. Australia's been negotiating since 2011. But Scott Morrison, I believe, after the meeting with Narendra Modi, hinted at that there may be something happening by the end of this year. And if it does happen end of this year or early next year, we can expect Scott Morrison to go to India. Narendra Modi's invited him. And that truly would be huge for India and Australia. Going on to the Quad just complements. The Quad is about lots of things, but it's not. But then again, I must also mention it's not easy to get an FTA from India. India doesn't sign easily. There are many issues within India that have to be taken up. So it's going to be a fascinating time. And this particular meeting between Scott Morrison and Narendra Modi could turn out to be a major event in the future if what he's hinted has happened.
Okay, so how do we define a major event in terms of what? Is the FTA the only way to define a major event? Because like you said, not an easy thing to happen.
And no, the thing is, you see, just to give it some context, Australia, a major exporter to China. China would buy a massive amount of all levels of things because of the explosion of development. Now China is looking inwards, collapsing inwards, and now India is progressing. India is developing its infrastructure, its highways, its internet on every level. And what we also know, and I mentioned previously yesterday, post-pandemics, there are massive changes. So this is a massive change opportunity. And there's no doubt in my mind that post the pandemic, there's going to be a huge influx. There's already a huge Indian diaspora in Australia and more highly skilled migrants coming here. So this will mean a complete transformation between Australia and India. What is something more general? It covers all sorts of things, from navies to vaccines, across left, right and centre. But particularly to Australia, it's a huge item if we're able to get an FTA with India.
Okay, well, and this is exactly perhaps the problem, that we have not been able to move past from the generics, and then it becomes tokenism if it doesn't move past the generics. But okay, so let me pick up that point with Ambassador Deepak Vohra. Ambassador Deepak Vohra, so where is the Quad going? Now we've had an in-person meeting with bilaterally, and we are having a Quad summit in a few hours, which will be in-person summit. Last time around in the virtual summit, we made 3 agreements. Where do you expect it to go now?
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to be with you and to learn from you, from Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, Mr. Thompson, Ms. Upadhyay, Ms. Upala, and of course, Ms. Joyita Basu. Sir, your question, where is Quad going? It begs the issue of the background. Where's NATO going? Where did the Warsaw Pact go? Into the dustbin? The only time that NATO invoked the clause about collective response to aggression was in Afghanistan. They didn't go around fighting the Soviet Union, etc. So where will Quad go? What do you want it to do? Jump off an aircraft or go marching into China and take over? No. Any organization evolves slowly, organically, over a period of time. Everybody has made it clear that the primary focus is not at the moment security, but the developmental agenda. Of course, there are going to be exercises. Of course, security will remain the core, but the soft exoskeleton, if I may use the term, is the developmental agenda. Cooperation in vaccine, cyber technology, connectivity, critical new sectors of human research and knowledge, etc., etc. Freedom, free and open Indo-Pacific, which, by the way, is the primary focus, that we can run around in the oceans, particularly the South China Sea, where 60, 70, 80% of the world's trade passes. It doesn't belong to anybody's grandfather. That is where I see the Quad going. I don't expect the militaries to be coming together and saying, okay, guys, we'll have a base in Australia, we'll have one in the US, we'll have one in India, we'll have another one in Japan. That is not how it happens, sir. Slowly, organically, it'll come, it'll respond to challenges. Now, question, what if China were to disappear tomorrow? What will happen to the Quad? What happened when the USSR disappeared? What happened to the Warsaw Pact? You have the answer to that yourself. So we have to wait and see what the new parameters are. Let me just, if you give me another minute more, why is Narendra Modi in the US in September 2021? So quickly into Joe Biden's first term. I've been in diplomacy long enough, sir, to know that every bilateral visit is considered path-breaking and a new chapter with lots of domestic media coverage, till the excitement and the memory fades and the follow-up is not always energetic. However, given the dangerous flux that our world is in today, this meeting acquires tremendous significance. It's a meeting of the 2 most powerful democracies in the world in terms of military strength, economy, and demographics. The old order is dying. Quad and Indo-US relations will enable the new world order to be born.
Okay, from having done this for a significant amount of time as well, I can promise you this is blanket coverage here in India everywhere. But it's page 4 coverage in the US as far as they're considered. It's of a Modi-Biden meeting, and that merits some thought, Joyita. I'm asking specifically about the Quad because here we are having a very serious meeting, potentially bilateral meetings about the Quad. Do we actually know what the Quad is? Is the Quad an annual summit? Is it an organization? Is it a charter-bearing organization? Is it an organization to be born with a secretariat? What's it going to be? Do we have a better understanding now? Joyita, unmute yourself, please.
Rishabh, frankly speaking, no, we don't. And that is the problem with the Quad. Because what is happening is that, I agree with Mr. Ambassador Vohra when he says, it's evolving. But frankly, I mean, the evolution is way too slow. When you compare it, say, with what happened with AUKUS, for example, I mean, look at the lightning speed with which it came into being. So right now, Quad is too confusing. Frankly, no one, its focus is diffuse. It doesn't have a focus. I mean, we are talking about developmental work and all that. That's fine. We are also not trying to take over China or ensure that China breaks up. I mean, I don't think even it will happen. I mean, I don't think China has learned very well from the mistakes of Soviet Russia. So I don't think it will be so easy to break up China into parts and all. So let us not go into that territory. Now, if you are going to make China as your central focus, let's face it, Quad is all about countering China. When you have got China as your central focus, and your central focus, China, is basically a land grabber. It's an expansionist power, it's an imperialist power. So when you have got something like that, and when it's the main means that it uses is its military, you do not have a military component in the Quad. You see, and although you keep having military exercises, you keep on saying at the same time and simultaneously, there is no military
but
component
Joyita, in this day and
Quad.
age, does it need to be on a dotted line? Isn't a military component implicit, or without it being explicit, it means nothing? It has no teeth.
Well, at the same time, you see, is China being, I mean, if you look at China, what China is fighting right now is influence war. I mean, and it is political warfare, it is 24/7, it is unrestricted warfare. All of us, Australia, I mean, all the Quad countries are facing it. India is facing it, I mean, from cyber attacks. So when I am talking about military component, I mean, you have to talk in terms of conventional warfare, you have to talk in 24/7 warfare, you have to talk in terms of, so all these areas. At the same time, you talk about your common values, you go about, vaccine manufacturing and all. You talk about, say, for example, what we're talking about, AI, artificial intelligence, a lot of work can happen over there. But at the same time, you need to have a charter. Rishabh, we have discussed this enough. We need a charter, an Indo-Pacific charter, where you lay down certain rules. And for us, China is a physical threat. Okay,
yes, no, but either because of that or despite that, we are also reticent on on taking a public position. We in the Indian media take very strong positions, but as far as government of India is concerned, we don't have a strong position on the origin of the virus or trade sanctions or on Taiwan or on the South China Sea or I don't know, North Korea firing weapons near Japan. Let me get Kriti into this. Kriti, so here we have official in person. There's going to be a Quad summit. Do we now have a better understanding of what the Quad is? I don't know. Is the US Council Foreign Relations getting very excited about it? Because Biden had options to do other things, but he wants to push the Quad. He's not called for a NATO summit. He's called for a Quad summit.
Yeah, hi, Rishabh. Firstly, good to see you here, and always great to be back on Newsx. Thanks for calling me. A few things. Firstly, there is an inherent shift and I'm not a US policy analyst, I'm a US-India policy analyst, but just being in this town and seeing everything, there is an inherent shift, and that's why you don't see Biden calling a NATO summit, but you see, the second Quad summit happening within the year, because after Afghanistan, after what EU is doing in terms of not being as much on board with dealing with common challenges, by common challenges I mean China, India and the Quad has become more and more important to the US. Secondly, on the issue of what is Quad, guys, it takes working in the policy lane, and I know I'm really young compared to all of you who've been working here for decades, but from what I have learned from my seniors is that policy takes time. It takes years to move an inch. Let's just go back a second, okay? We started as a working level group. It's not funny. We went to ministerial level. We're at a leaders level summit today, in-person summit today, and I think the Quad has achieved a lot in terms of just getting China, China like what's happening, right? Just go and read all the Global Times pieces, though I don't recommend you do, but you can see the sort of anxiety that China is going through. And what do we want? What do we want? Do we want a military alliance? By we, I mean in India. No, we don't. We're non-aligned. Even today, we talk about multilateralism, right? Pragmatic multilateralism, issue-based cooperation. So I don't think it's right on our part as Indians to say look at AUKUS. AUKUS is happening because all three of them are already in a military alliance. We're not in a military alliance with anybody. We're not getting into a military alliance with anybody. And, we have former ambassadors here who can tell you more about that and the thinking behind it. And so I don't think we should be thinking what more do we want. And as you rightly said...
No, but the question I'm asking, Preity, is that is it more than a buzzword? If you'd asked the same question, I don't know, 10 years ago, and US think tanks would have been making BRICS reports, and BRICS was the latest thing, and the BRICS was no friend to America. At the WTO, at the UN, it was a challenge to America, and it was a buzzword, and the buzzword just flitted away. It meant nothing. So is this just a buzzword? It's a matter of convenience, or is it something structural that is now happening in the global order?
Okay, so firstly, this is an informal grouping, and like I said, because it's not a military alliance, there cannot be a secretariat or all of the other things that we want. I do think that it's more than a buzzword, but time will tell. You and I will talk again in a few years, and we'll see what's happened. But let's look at now. What are the deliverables right now? We already have 3 working groups, very important working groups, right? Emerging technology. A lot of it deals with rare earths, chips, critical technologies, all of which are important for India, for all of our countries. The vaccine working group. And by the way, just yesterday we had the COVID-19 summit where it was announced that 1 billion vaccine doses will be produced in India with Quad countries together. We have the climate working group where India really is taking a leading role with the International Solar Alliance and what have you. So I think let's look at the positives. Let's see what we can do, especially since India has such an eminent role to play here and is really playing a leadership role.
Okay. No, there are positives. We are heading in the right direction, but the speed of heading in that right direction then has speed bumps like what's happening in Afghanistan, for example. So let me get Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor back into this conversation. Ambassador Kapoor, have we as a collective, like I said, the biggest fear or concern sitting here in India was that here comes Joe Biden, we don't know, maybe he's going to go soft on China, maybe he doesn't give 2 figs about the Quad, but everything that he has done seems to express the opposite. But in brass tacks, as we measure things, has China had a price to pay for everything that has happened, from Galwan to Taiwan to the South China Sea to Wuhan? Have they had a price to pay?
Well, so far in direct tangible terms, not yet. I guess it's getting there slowly, in the sense that if you as a country are losing the trust of your neighbors, you're losing the trust of so many other countries globally, step by step, and your own citizens, whether they are in Hong Kong or in, the other provinces, Tibet or Outer Mongolia or Xinjiang, they have no trust in the leadership of China. So besides that, you talk about South Korea, you talk about Japan, you talk about Australia, you talk about India, you talk about Vietnam, you talk about, 20 other countries. And they all have varying shades of problems with China. And so to that extent, for the Quad to continue on the current trajectory is very useful, because it is giving sleepless nights to the leadership in China. It's something which is, sort of exacerbating.
Okay, so let me then ask you an even straighter question. Are we further away from the risk of World War III? Are we closer to it? Does it seem to have dissipated? Are the Chinese feeling squeezed enough to hunker down for a bit?
Well, no, not yet. In the sense, the person at the helm of affairs in China, he has his grand global ambitions. He wants the world to be remade in the image of China. And he has not yet backed down from that sort of vision of his or dream of his, till either the economy implodes and then explodes within China, or till the polity implodes and then explodes.
Okay.
So that is where we are.
Okay, so I don't know whether the implosion is happening. I don't know. Some people are telling me no, Evergrande is the implosion, or the failure of the south-north water plans is the implosion. I don't know what the implosion is. Ambassador Deepak Vora, so let me put the same question in a different way. If, and it's still an if because we don't know, but if we assume that the Chinese had a malified intent with COVID-19, that actually it's the Wuhan virus that came out of a lab, intentionally or otherwise, then one is the assumption that we are now in the era of bioterrorism. So in that event of biowarfare, are the Chinese now never going to do it again because they feel, oh, the Americans, the Indians, the Japs and the Aussies are going to teach us a lesson if we ever try again?
When I was studying in the US, there were some lectures I attended by a fellow called Robert Merton, who had popularized the law of unintended consequences. You take purposive action, but the repercussions, unintended, can be entirely different. You're absolutely right that the Chinese have been hoisted with their own petard. They created the virus that is now universally accepted. Whether it escaped from the Wuhan lab because viruses are master escape artists or was deliberately released, that is the question. And on that, there are varying opinions, including the US intelligence reports, our own analyses, and what we have seen from around the world. China will continue to deny this right through. Sir, I urge you to once again, all my colleagues, to once again read Ping Pong's speech, video speech to the United Nations General Assembly. He said, we are a great country, we believe in freedom, we believe in democracy, we believe in all the wonderful things that the world believes in. But if you guys ask me about the origin of the virus, I'll beat the daylights out of you. Now, I was very, very clear what he meant, that do everything except ask me where the virus has come from, and I'm a great force for global development, etc. It's exactly what Joe Biden had said also. Apart from the I'll beat you up if you ask about the origin of the virus, he talked about freedom, he talked about democracy, he talked about the New World Order. It's identical. I'm not sure that Ping Pong based his speech on what Joe Biden had said.
Okay, but Ambassador, let me just fixate on this, because if we have to assume, okay, that this happened in China, okay, and either malified intent or accidental intent or accessory after the fact of the murder. Is it over? Can we now sit back and say, with the vaccines, we are no longer afraid that another virus might leak out of China, and do this 2 or 3 years later?
Not at all, sir. Why do we want to know the origin of the virus? It's not so much to punish China, sir. It's to prevent a recurrence of a similar event. The last time this happened 600 years ago, you remember, up to 200 million people died. That was the Black Death or the bubonic plague in Europe and Eurasia and parts of Africa. What we want to do, if we know how it originated, we can prevent a recurrence. It has devastated not just lives, but also the global economy.
Okay,
which
so you're
is
saying
now
no.
the focus. The
So
Prime
you're saying
Minister
no.
has been saying, get the economy back.
Okay, so you're saying no. So Joyita Basu, here's the thing, right? I mean, either we have closed the chapter on COVID-19 and we are now moving out. Stock markets of the world seem to think that we are. Are we? Are we out of the risk now? Because if indeed there is a snippet of a chance this was actually biowarfare, 1% chance, then who's to stop the Chinese from doing it again?
Well, Rishabh, the only way that you can prevent China from doing it is, first of all, putting the fear of, we can't say God, whatever they worship. The thing is, you see, unless and until you do that, China, there is a huge possibility of China doing it again. And the problem is that, the only way, unless China is itself suffering as much as the rest of the world is, which I think to an extent it has happened. We do not know exactly what has happened in China. But yes, the risk is always there, and we are not yet out of the woods. Even now, daily we are getting around 30,000 cases. We are nowhere even nearing the end of
so it's even worse if you're sitting in America right now, right? It's far worse, but it's being treated as endemic, as normal now. So again, here's the bottom line question: if there was a snippet of a possibility, right, that this was indeed biowarfare, accidental or otherwise, have we closed that chapter? Preity Upala, can we sit back with our parents, families, and children, and get back with our lives after two disrupted years and many millions of deaths later, and say it's over?
I'm afraid the story is just beginning. I think the chapter is just beginning. I would love to say that we can move on, but unfortunately, this is the new normal. And I think bioterrorism is the new nuclear terrorism. And the most dangerous thing about it is that it can be unleashed like that. To be honest, by forget China, there are other, even the US could unleash this, or they could be other nations who know the mechanics of how one does that. So
that's my question, Preity Upala. Are we then in some mutually assured destruction phase? Are we, because no treaty has been signed, there is no NPT, CTBT here, there's no bilateral agreement not to, no first use. These things don't exist right now. There is a bio-warfare treaty dating back 40 years ago, which hasn't been updated. So are we in an MAD world? If you're sitting in Beijing, are you convinced that if we ever do it again, the Americans will also unleash a virus in China, so we better not do it?
Well, a very empowered US would manifest that situation where there are agreements and countries understand the consequences should this ever happen again. But unfortunately, that we haven't crossed that bridge yet. We should have, after 3 million deaths and the whole world being shut down for almost 2 years. Sadly, we are not there yet. So I don't know what else is going to take. This will continue. There will be mutations. Masks are going to be around for another couple of years. So hold on. It ain't over yet. I actually think it could get a lot worse in different manifestations. It's for the rest of the world to come together and put some pressure. I think it's also a matter of managing expectations. I just want to make an interesting point. I've been listening to American, defense and strategy analysts, policy analysts, and our understanding of this problem and Quad and with China is like our issue with China is different than the issue that some of these policymakers and lawmakers in the US, even though China is directly in competition with them. When you speak to some of the, American policy analysts, they'll tell you, the way that they speak, it's not very, they're not looking to curb China as such. What they want is, a better trade relationship with China with fewer issues. And when we hear that, it's scary because we think, after everything, it would have been pleasing to hear if you, put your foot down and sort of come down on them harder.
After half a million American dead, you'd think, right? That something would be different. But ironically, just like with Pakistan, very little obviously is. So let me get Charles Thompson back in. Charles Thompson, have we closed the chapter on COVID-19? Because if the Chinese will have you believe it was Aussie beef to blame.
I'm currently in lockdown, by the way. I can only go to the shop one time a day. So we're definitely not over COVID. But look, I want to look, because there's so much negativity. Let me focus on the positive aspects of it. Science, vaccine technology is constantly improving. Even in a country like Australia, we're learning how to get vaccines, and India, of course, is now the master of it, out a lot more rapidly. People are getting used to the concept of vaccines. Vaccines, not just now for COVID, but there are vaccines for many other things. There are many offshoots there. So I think that's a very positive aspect too of it. If we look at history, even in the 19th century, I forget the date, there was a pandemic. Every time we have a pandemic, it forces the world to change in many ways. The way we communicate, the way we're now talking to each other and sitting in our homes or rooms, even in lockdown.
Yeah, but Charles, here's the problem, right? While any vaccine technology, it'll have to be reactive, post facto. If indeed there is a small percentage of chance that a virus was man-made, mutated, or accelerated, or its DNA manipulated, then that technology is expanding also. You can do DNA manipulation at home now with CRISPR kits, I'm told. So if you're sitting in China, are you now saying that, okay, if this was inadvertent, by mistake, or malified, that we must make sure that this never happens again, because the consequences are going to be devastating for us? Or are you thinking, hey, We wanted the world to burn so that we can emerge, and the world is burning. We can do this again.
China's not listening.
Okay.
China will do whatever it thinks is right. It's the center of the universe. And it doesn't give a damn about anybody else. It doesn't matter what you say to them. Except if you disagree with them, they get upset. Point number one. Point number two, if you look at the technology of vaccines were taking 10 to 20 years to develop. Now we're talking 12 months to 18 months. And it's possible we'll get even faster at it. So technology is definitely adapting to this change state. And in countries like Australia, we have an aging population. China also has an aging population. So for China, COVID is a disaster, much more so than for India, in the sense that it affects people over 50 more than under 50. India is the largest resource of young people in the world. So, there are many ways of looking at this, but I think now we're getting into the post-COVID stage, and everybody's looking at how to get out of it and how to formally manage.
Okay, so there is going to be a post-COVID world. We might be there, not just there, or eventually end up there. Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, then that's exactly my thought. How is then this post-COVID world going to be fundamentally different? Is it going to be that the Quad is going to now be the shining light, to which the rest of us, in the universities and think tanks that you work, in the media that I work, that we look for guidance now or seek ourselves to guide this formulation, because this is the one that's going to sort out the world's problems?
So, Rishabh, in the book which we wrote, the title was exactly what you're talking about. It was Beyond the COVID Pandemic, Envisioning a Better World by Transforming the Future of Healthcare. In that we have discussed about the aspect that the current pandemic is not just a one-off event, and it's not as to if another pandemic will happen. It's a question of when the next one will come around, and whether it is a pandemic or a terrorist attack, bioweapon terror attack, or a natural disaster or a climate change disaster. These sort of things are only going to increase. So the world has to configure right now how it is going to cope with those challenges. Secondly, it has to get to the root, as Ambassador Vora mentioned, of the problem, so that if a country is identified, if China is a culprit, there have to be sufficient penalties and costs on China so that it does not indulge in.
No, but how does that happen, Ambassador Kapoor? Are we expecting an Adlai Stevenson or a Colin Powell or somebody in their shoes to come and sit in New York in a couple of days and say, okay, here's a PPT presentation and here are some photographs and mock-ups of what we think happened in Wuhan, because we have these very powerful satellites that I'm pretty sure can give a few square centimeter imagery live of that Wuhan lab, and we've figured out what was going on. We've done some AI algorithm mapping of the population movements, of the ambulance movements in China over the past 1 year, which they can do, they have the technology to do, and this is what we discovered. Are we expecting an Adlai Stevenson moment, then saying this is the photograph of the ship that's heading to Cuba, that has the missiles on board, here's the evidence?
Who is that question addressed to?
Ambassador Kapoor.
Okay, sorry, thank you. Yes, in the sense that, unless you have something like that happening, or suppose some of the scientists in the labs who have been closely associated with this gain of function research in Wuhan come out of China's clutches onto the other part of the world, either the Western world or anywhere else, and then they start talking about what actually went on there. Okay. So some such activity has to happen.
Okay. So you mentioned gain of function. So let me get Kriti into this. Kriti, I know this is not exactly your domain of expertise, but from what's happening, can the United States come out and resoundingly corner China on COVID-19 without opening skeletons of gain of function issues within their own medical fraternity? Is it possible?
Again, Rishabh, you said not my domain, and I like to stick to my areas of expertise. I'm not an epidemiologist, I'm not a scientist, but I think I can talk about, what are the lessons that we learned from COVID. And I do echo what Dr. Charles Thompson just said that, if this was something that China did think of, then I think that was the most foolish thing ever, because just look at China, it's isolated. Nobody likes China. I don't think they ever did, but it has picking fights with everybody, even from Russia. That's pretty much its only ally right now, right? From what I'm reading and from what I'm hearing from China analysts, there is some discontent within China itself. In the past 6 to 8 months, there've been a lot of more controlling measures. So I think for us in the Western world, in India, the lesson here to learn is that the weaknesses that the COVID pandemic showed, right, our over-reliance on China. Let's look at which country do all of our countries, the Quad partners, have the highest trade deficit with.
It's all China. No, and that's not going away anytime soon. It's not going away anytime soon. But again,
but we have to, right? We have to make it go sometime soon.
No, but
right?
either you're doing it implicitly, that it's happening subtly, and it's not happening very vocally, and that's what's told to me, that now this is about action. It's not about words. It's not about statements and dossiers. It's actually about what's structurally taking different place in the world. So Joyita Basu, is something structurally happening? Because can the Americans come out and tell the world, we've caught the smoking gun, this was Wuhan, without the smoking gun leading into their own backyard, and Fauci and whatnot?
But Rishabh, that's a mirage. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's primarily because, think of it like this. Even a year back, the time leading up to Biden's president, the time he became president, the American media was not even talking about China's role in the spread of the virus. Social medias, like Facebook, and they were blocking anti-China stories. So you expect, we have enough evidence, enough proof that, Chinese analysts, and say, for example, even in the US Army, people who have been talking against China, they have had their progress kind of shunted, they have been shunted out. I personally know examples of that. So you expect, and this is okay, it is only now, it is only now that when Mr. Biden realizes that, there is a domestic fallout, that he has woken up to it.
Okay.
I don't think.
Okay, guys, since this is a live telecast, I'm going to now spend just a few minutes before I take a break and be less cerebral. Let's take a straight question. Let me kick this off with Preity. Preity, is there going to be a quiet time if we are having to accept that a global Cold War is not starting, it's already well underway? Is it a quiet time, or do you suspect worse is to come?
I think the Cold War is happening as we speak. It actually started probably a few years ago. The worst is yet to come, and I think it will take different forms. And the key, unfortunately, in this sort of very volatile, turbulent time and unpredictable times, is managing expectations, managing our emotions, our perspective on what's going on. And also understanding that the only constant is change. And even from a philosophical perspective, all we can do is just move forward.
The Chinese believe in a lot of philosophy, but then they show up in Galwan and they show up and might just want to take over China. So
be like the flowing waters. There's a Chinese proverb, right?
Yeah, but Ambassador Deepak Vora, is this a quieter phase in the global Cold War, or do you expect a far more aggressive phase coming our way?
Are you asking if this is the lull before storm?
Either of the two, or I want you to tell me it's all over and we can carry on with our lives.
I don't think that we are in the... I wish I could tell you it's over at all. Viruses don't need passports to cross borders, nor does any virus ever die, sir. The thing that caused Ebola virus or AIDS, etc., there's run in the jungles of Congo.
Okay.
And from
okay, unfortunately, I'm just losing you there. I think
the gain of function approach. I wish somebody would talk about, and I can't be close to them. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I'm losing you there. Maybe the Chinese don't want you to comment on the Cold War. Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
is it? Yeah, I'll just come back to you in a second. So, Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, is there a lull in the Cold War? Is it on? Do we accept it that the Cold War is on and it's probably going to get a whole lot worse before it becomes better?
Well, what I see the situation in the world today is that as long as there is a belligerent and aggressive China on the world stage with a leader like that, and as long as there is Sino-Wahhabi sort of, compact, the chances of peace in the world are very remote. To what extent it'll erupt into full-fledged sort of war or conflagration has to be seen, in the sense if either China or the Wahhabi terrorism is crippled in some way or the other before this erupts, then there's a possibility of the situation not deteriorating to a great extent.
Okay, I've never seen any government take a stronger position on them than the Aussie government has. Charles Thompson, there have been no punches pulled. I'm not saying the Chinese have pulled any punches. They've been very, very threatening. But if somebody is making bold statements on China, most of them have been coming from Australia. They haven't been coming from New Delhi. They haven't been coming from Washington. Are we in a period where we can feel slightly comfortable that a global Cold War, which we don't understand because it might have cyber or industrial or AIs, bots fighting against each other. We don't know what's happening right now, honestly. Is it in a lull? Do we expect some time of peace, or do you expect it to become much worse?
I have a slightly different perspective. Firstly, from Australia's point of view, we always put our foot in our mouth. We see it and then we say it straight. In the rest of Southeast Asia, everybody bows, smiles, and stabs you in the back. So there's two different strategies. But what's more importantly that I'm noticing now, you see, China, they're smart people. And what they did and what they've done over the last 20 years is that whenever there was a dispute with another country, and call it wolf diplomacy, salami slicing, or whatever, they've told that individual country, don't get anybody else involved. We'll sit down and we'll do a deal and we'll fix up the problem. Slowly but surely, every single country, India included, has learned it doesn't work that way. China just takes everything. So now what you're finding is, even in countries like Indonesia and the Philippines, you're starting to hear not the leaders themselves, but their advisors speak out against China. And now what I find fascinating, because I've been following India for 40 years, I can go back a few years and the word China was just never mentioned. But now, get an Indian diplomat or anybody from the Indian subcontinent and, say the word China, and it's like waving a red flag. Now, in that development, what's also very important is India needs to now bring that message and explain how it's dealing with China. Because India is having success with China where a lot of other countries have not. And whether it be the banning of the applications or marking products of where they're manufactured from, all of these things that India has been done have been very effective, and it's worried China significantly.
Okay. So you're saying it is worrying China significantly, but is it having an impact? So I know it's a generic question, but Preity, are we further away from an explosive period in this global Cold War? Is it going to calm down for a bit, or is it going to just get worse in the next few weeks and months?
Rishabh, you asked a very interesting question earlier. Is this Cold War? And I'll steal a phrase from a fellow think tanker, good friend Jeff Smith, and hopefully he, since we are friends, he won't mind. That we're in cold peace, right? It's not a Cold War; it's a cold peace. And I just hope it doesn't get worse. There are all indications, right? And what happens? All this Quad, AUKUS. China doing what China is doing, all of this, what does it eventually lead to? There is some escalation, right? We as let's forget we are Indians or anybody else. Let's just be, foreign policy analysts. Okay. So I just hope it doesn't happen though.
Okay, we're all sounding very hopeful, as we always are, right? Believe in karma. But karma is defined as something that I can't say on public television as well. Joyita Basu, Are we just expecting karma to come for Xi Jinping?
Well, I think we're expecting too much. You know, I mean, if you look at even what is happening in China, I mean, Xi Jinping has surrounded himself with loyalists. Even if he has certain problems with Le Keqiang, the Prime Minister, I mean, it doesn't come out, you know, and that is why he has been conducting a purge. He conducted a purge. There's no way that Xi Jinping is going anywhere. And when you are talking about a Cold War, I mean, it's a 24/7 warfare. You know, this is the problem that we have. We say that China is not doing anything when it is actually, I mean, influence peddling. In fact, the West has been among the worst affected, including countries like, say, Canada and US. They have been worst affected when it comes to China's warfare. When we are talking about a kinetic conflict, is a kinetic conflict possible or not? Right now, it may not seem possible.
Okay.
But one cannot rule out the